Hello everyone, today is episode 2 of Dentistry Decoded. On the first episode, we talked about tooth numbers. On this episode, we'll be talking about tooth surfaces.
David, you have one of the worst cavities I have ever seen. Okay, have a good day.
Aren't you gonna fix it?
Well, I'm not a dentist, I'm a dental monitor. I just tell you when you have a bad cavity.
That's bad.
This is Dr. Tamisha Denis, and this is The Modern Smile. Now, tooth surfaces, why are we talking about tooth surfaces? So I told you at the beginning of this series of Dentistry Decoded that I was going to tell you all the things that the dentist was talking about when you go in for your dental visit. So the first time we talked about tooth numbers. So we counted the tooth numbers just to review really quickly. 1 through 16, going from right to left, going down to the bottom left, 17 through 32. Now today we're going to talk about tooth surfaces, and this is important for a lot of different reasons. And the reason that this is important is when you go into the dental office and you have a cavity, the dentist is going to tell you where on your tooth you have a cavity. 12 MO, 2 OL, 19 MOD. Now, all of the sets of surfaces are just directional. They tell us where the cavity or where whatever we're trying to identify is on the tooth. Now, how important that is to you understanding if you have a cavity on the mesial, on the distal, on the occlusal, on the buccal, on the lingual, all of those terminology doesn't really change the experience that you're going to have. However, sometimes that can get a little confusing hearing them say things like, so depending on where the cavity is on the tooth, it helps us to identify it either via inside your mouth through a clinical exam, or the x-ray. So we use that so that later on when you come back, we don't have to redo the exam to know where your cavity is. So let's talk about what the tooth surfaces are and what they mean. So in order for me to illustrate before I use teeth what tooth surfaces are, I'm going to use my body. So as you can see, I'm standing with my arms face forward, and we're going to use the word mesial. The word mesial means the front end of a tooth. So this would be mesial. So the front end would be the side that's faced towards the front of your face. The front of your face, mesial. The next word we use opposite is called distal. So that is the back end. So that is the back of the tooth is going to call distal. So the back end of your tooth is distal. Now every single term that I use has an abbreviation. So M, mesial, D, distal. The next one we're going to use is the side, and I'm going to say towards my right, but it doesn't have to be, but the side towards the outside of your mouth can be a variety of things. Now the word buccal in Latin means cheek, so we can call that buccal if it's faced more towards the inside. We can also call that facial because it's also faced turned within the outside, or we can call that labial, which also means lips, and that's also faced towards the outside. So the part that faces outside is going to be buccal, labial, or facial, and we can use B, L, or F. Now, when we're talking more towards the inside, we can use, depending on what your tooth is facing, we can use the word lingual, which means near your tongue, or we can use the word palatal, which means near the roof of your mouth. So naturally your tongue is on the bottom. Most of the time we're going to say lingual on the bottom teeth, but we can also use it for the top. And sometimes we use the word palatal towards the top. So that can be abbreviated as P or L. So the last set of directions we're going to talk about is the top and the bottom. So the top part of the tooth we call occlusal. That means the biting or the chewing surface. So the top part is going to be occlusal. Sometimes we call that incisal. And the reason we call that incisal is most of the front teeth have a very narrow edge, and we call that incisal. And the back end we call occlusal. Now we can use those words interchangeably, but for the most part we use occlusal or incisal, which is also abbreviated O and I. Now, one of the other terms you won't hear very often is cervical. Cervical means down near the gum. So depending on if it's a top or the bottom tooth, we can say cervical right around here or cervical right down there. And that just means down near the gum. So let's review. Mesial towards the front, distal towards the back, facial, buccal, or labial towards the outside of the tooth, or lingual or palatal towards the inside. Got it? Simple. So the tooth surfaces, although mostly you will hear us call those things out when we're referring to where your cavity is on the tooth, we can also use a combination of those things. And it's kind of like roadsides that point in different directions. Now, since I've illustrated that with my body, now I'm going to illustrate that using actual teeth. So let's look at this. So I'm going to use my trusty little pen to point this out. Now, here we have, this is the upper teeth, by the way. These are upper teeth, and we already know how to count them. So now we're going to look at this outside. That would be the buccal. Got it? This outside, what is that called? That's the buccal. Buccal all the way on the outside. Remember, if it's towards closer to the lips, we can call that labial. If it's closer to the cheek, we can call that buccal. Or in general, we can call all of these surfaces facial. Now, let's talk about the inside. Now, this is the roof of your mouth, so we can call this palatal, like the palate. Or we can call that lingual, near the tongue. Of course, my model doesn't have the tongue, but all this inside part would be lingual. So lingual or palatal. The next surface we can talk about is towards the front or the back of the tooth. So here we go. This is the mesial of that tooth. This is the mesial of that tooth. This is the mesial of that tooth. The mesial, the mesial, the mesial. The front end is the mesial towards the front of the face. Now, alternatively, then we can call this the distal. So the back end is the distal. And if you've already caught on, distal, distal, distal. If you've already caught on, the mesial of one tooth touches the distal of another, right? So going towards the front is mesial, going towards the back is distal. So this is the distal end of this tooth, and this is the mesial end of this tooth. So the distal touches the mesial, okay? All right, now, then we talked about occlusal. So occlusal means the chewing surface of the tooth. Typically on the back teeth, we will say occlusal. When we get towards the front, we will say incisal, occlusal, incisal. Same thing here, occlusal, incisal, occlusal. Very good. So we hit everything. Oh, last one, cervical. So right at the gum line is going to be cervical. So right there. A lot of people get cavities here, mostly because of brushing their teeth too hard. In cervical, cervical, cervical. All right. So we covered all the surfaces of the teeth. So typically when a dentist will say to you, you have a cavity on the O or the occlusal, they mean you have a cavity in here, in one of those little grooves, occlusal. Usually cavities will come in combinations. So you can have occlusal, lingual, occlusal, buccal, occlusal, distal, occlusal, mesial. M-O-D-O-O-L. All of those letters have meaning, and they're not scary. They just mean that you have cavities on different surfaces of your teeth, and it helps us dentists along with the numbers to identify where the cavities are. So that's all for teeth surfaces. I hope you learned something so that next time you go to the dentist, you don't get so scared. This is Dr. Tamisha Denis, and this is A Modern Smile. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and we'll see you on the next episode of Dentistry Decoded. Thank you for watching.